Welcome back to Daytime Ottawa. You know what? He wears so many hats. I'm not even sure how to title him. He's an artist, he's a producer, clothing designer. I'm sure he can share with me some of the other titles that he has. But Cody Coyote joining us on the show. How are you?
Hey, doing well yourself?
I'm doing great. We were just talking about your summer. You've had a fantastic summer performing around the country.
Oh yeah, I just flew right by. Like, I wish I would have had more time to just enjoy it, but you know, performing, it does come first, and I think it's been a great one at that.
I mentioned clothing designer. We're going to get to that in just a moment, because I want to start with, you know, your latest release is called Passage. You put that out back on June 20th, and that was really, I think a lot of the messaging from that is the inspiration for the clothing line. Let's talk about that album first of all, Cody, and some of the messaging on that album.
Yeah, like it's really, how am I going to say that, like beginning an important conversation that I feel needs to be happening day to day, not just the one-time conversation like, hey, we're talking about reconciliation on a specific day. Let's talk about it every single day, right? And being June 20th, I put that album out. I know we previously spoke about it, but that was the day in 1906 that my ancestor, Ogima, you know, Chief Michel Baptiste Twain, signed the James Bay Treaty, Treaty Number 9. And understanding a little bit more about what's happened in my lineage, in my family, and how the residential school system has directly impacted my family, I chose to create that project to speak up about it. And here we are now, you know, after its release, and I'm continuing to apply pressure. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned it isn't one day. Do you think we're, as Canadians, do you think we've come a long way? I know there's still a long way to go, but do you think that conversation has been getting better, Cody?
From what I've seen, yeah, there's a lot of people, and like I reflected, you know, last year, right, on September 30th, and I looked around here in so-called Ottawa, and I just saw a lot of non-Indigenous people wearing things like orange shirts.
Right.
And really stepping up and asking questions like, how can I be a better ally? You know, how can I help out? And in my head, reflecting from last year till now, I've seen a lot of discussions happening and a lot of people holding each other accountable. Like they're alleviating, how am I going to say that? Like the responsibility of having to carry this on our own. Like they're very much standing beside us and saying, hey, like let's continue doing this walk together, versus just saying Indigenous people are going to be the only ones that are speaking about this, right?
Right. So well, let's get to the new collection. I know that online you can do some poses, man. Yeah, exactly. You can do some poses, but you've been getting a lot of great feedback online. Tell me about. Let's first of all talk about the inspiration and the design, first of all.
Well, like I remember sitting there and again, coming back to the history of what's happened with my family, and you know, learning that my ancestor literally sat in a canoe with Duncan Campbell Scott and the treaty commissioners when they were coming up to our territory. And if people know who Duncan Campbell Scott was, he was one of the pioneers behind the residential school system, right? Also, another pioneer was Sir Johnny Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of so-called Canada. Having the knowledge of quotes that this, you know, human being had said once upon a time, right? I decided to take one of his most infamous quotes, put it on the back of his shirt to remind people this was your first Prime Minister. This was the mentality that he had.
What is that quote?
It includes calling us savages, right? And often referring to us as inferior, if I gotta say the least, right? Like taking the savage out of the Indian child. Things like this, right? This nature. And, you know, being here in so-called Ottawa, like I remember once upon a time, you know, in the airport, they had a statue of this guy, and I'd come back from touring and I would see this statue, right? And in my head, I'm like, there's still people that think this way, right? Even in 2022.
Right.
So what can I do to send this message? So I took him and I put his face on a shirt and I duct taped his mouth shut and I crossed his eyes out. Right? Just to say like, hey, now you can understand what it's like to be silenced, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
I believe I'm not even sure. I wasn't even looking at the monitor because I've been listening so intently to you. I don't know if we brought up some of the other pieces, but let's talk about, you know, plans for here we have some of the pieces, and tell me about the feedback, because you said, you know, people, I believe there's a a great store downtown that pretty much bought you out, right, in the first line.
Bimaadiziwin, right, the place of trade. It's right in the Byward Market, and I do need to give them a shout out, as well as the Assembly of Seven Generations. They've been, so supportive of this whole process and supporting the new clothing line that I launched in 2020, right? Bimaadiziwin Collective, the Life Collective, but also with this new collection that I have, right? Not only almost buying like the most of the wholesale order that I had, right, of the new crew necks, but just really stepping up and being like, hey, like, okay, this is a new avenue that you're approaching with fashion. Like, we're here to support, right? So,
right. Well, and I think I know you well enough, Cody, that whenever you do something like this, you give back in some way. I imagine you're doing the same now?
100%. 10% of every sale is going back to helping Indigenous youth programming in the Ottawa area. And it's been effective. Last year we had over $500 that we got back, So some people may be like, oh, that's a bit small, but it's a start.
Yeah,
it's better
exactly.
than nothing, right?
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier a lot of Canadians are becoming better allies. How can Canadians become better allies in your mind?
Support Indigenous fashion all the way. You know, like I often reflect on how I walk into these different stores, these retail stores, and think about it. I'm like, how beautiful would it be to see all these different Indigenous clothing lines that are out there represented in these mass, stores that people shop at every single day.
Right.
And that's really flipping the script in the economy, right? And allowing there to be representation for us, not only in the fashion industry, but also
and seeing
in the
yourself.
storefront. Yeah.
Right? Seeing yourself and your community when you're out in your community, right? I mean, that's important. For people that want to have a look at the collection, what's the best place to do it?
Bimaadiziwincollective.com is the easiest place to find it.
There it is right there on the screen just below. Cody, really, hey, well done. Always appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, Miigwech, thank you so much.
Miigwech,
I appreciate
good to see you, buddy.
Miigwech, good to see you as well.
Hey, don't go away. Lots more coming up here on Daytime Ottawa, including, live in-person theater is back. The Great Canadian Theatre Company has a fantastic production. We'll give you all the details coming up here on Daytime.